Welcome to Law and Order BUX. I'm your host, Bucks County Sheriff Fred Harran. Every corner of Bucks County has a story to tell. Sometimes a story of resilience. Sometimes a story that chills us to the bone. Sometimes a story of government not being able to get out of its own way. Here, the forces of law and order are constantly at work, often behind the scenes. Join us as we delve into the gripping realities of crime and justice in our community. We'll explore the hidden worlds, the difficult decisions, and the unwavering commitment it takes to maintain law and order right here in Bucks County. Hello, Fred Harran, Bucks County Sheriff here, and welcome to episode 4. I can't believe it's 4 episodes already of Law and Order BUX. And, it just, every episode is just, gets better and better. We've got another great episode ahead today, and I have a good friend of mine, a guy I worked with for a long time, Dave Nieves. Dave is currently a Chester County detective, but he was a Ben Salem Township police officer and a Ben Salem Township detective before he retired in Ben Salem, and I guess he just couldn't get enough of it and got a job as a county detective in Chester County, which is one of our neighboring counties. They do amazing work. But Dave, today we're gonna talk about something that I kind of alluded to in episode 1 when I kind of gave a little overview of how I got to Bucks County. The other thing everyone should know, I'm from Brooklyn, a Mets fan, and Dave, you're a Mets fan now, huh? Where are you from, buddy?
No, I'm from the Bronx, and I'm a Yankee fan.
Well, you know what? I like most things about you. You know, what am I going to do with you? Sorry, I won't mention the Mets. I won't mention the Mets anymore during this episode.
That's all right.
But Dave and I have a lot in common. We're both good-looking guys, and okay, you're supposed to smile, Dave.
It's a fact. I mean,
but from New York, Ben Salem police officers. But I came on in '87, and Dave, you came on in what year?
1992.
In '92. So in '87, I was on about a couple of months, and I don't know how it happened to you, Dave, how it came about, but you're going to tell us in a little bit. But I remember being on the street, and my New York accent was a lot heavier at that time. It only comes out now on certain words, chocolate, draw, water, things like that. Butter, but certain words that it comes out. You've lost a lot of it too, but you still have some of your words as well. But I was on the street patrolling, and I got a call from dispatch to make a return for the chief. And at that time, you know him very well, Frank Friel. May he rest in peace. What a mentor for so many law enforcement officers in Delaware Valley. I mean, breaking the mob. Frank was a man of men, I should say, and a cop's cop. Like a John Timoney, coming from New York. I mean, Frank was that type of guy. Just a cop's cop. And I remember I'm like, oh my God, what did I do? So I pulled into headquarters, and I came out, and my sergeant was there. He goes, "You're okay. Don't worry about it. The chief wants to see you about something." I'm like, well, this doesn't sound good. And he calls me in his office, and he says, I want you to go up to Doylestown and meet with the district attorney and Paul Gorley, who was the chief of county detectives at the time. He says, they have an assignment if you're interested in, but I don't really want to talk about it here. So I went up, and they asked me, because I was new to the area and I was very young looking. I was 24 at the time, but I looked much younger. I wish that was so today. And they said, would you be interested in going undercover in a high school? A superintendent reached out to us. They're having some problems with drugs, and they want to tackle it. And for me, 21 Jump Street was hot on television. So I'm like, wait a minute, you're going to pay me to go back to high school? And they said, yeah. And we'll talk a little bit more about it. But, this was now September of 98. I was like a couple months out of the police academy, which was good, right? Because I didn't have those police tendencies that we know about today. Certain things that, after so many years, you and I do being police officers and being in law enforcement, but it was just, it was a great opportunity. We're going to come back to it. But, then a couple years later, I'm back on the street and you come into Bensalem. And how did it happen for you?
Well, for me, I never touched the street. So when I graduated the academy and I was with Kelleher and Frank Davis and that group, we basically all got, with 7 of us, we come back, everybody gets their assignment. This is your FTO, your field training officer. And I'm the only one that doesn't have a field training officer. It says, see Director Friel. So the same thing. I'm like, wait, maybe I'm not getting the job. So I figured I did well in the academy, but yeah, I went to see Director Friel, and he's like, hey, good news and bad news. And I'm like, sure. He goes, what do you want first? And I said, I'll take the bad news. He goes, the bad news is not going to patrol. So what's the good news? He goes, well, same thing. You're going to have to meet with Alan Rubenstein, who was the DA at the time.
Mine too, the DA, yeah.
And so I had to go up to Doylestown, met him, and he goes, listen, this is the assignment. You were on loan from Bensalem to Falls Township. You're going to be at Pennsbury High School as a senior. And there are numerous investigations that they've tried to tap into some sources, and a lot of the students there have connections so we want to put you there. And I'm like, whatever you want me to do. So I went in there. That was in January of 1993. And I actually I had to go up with Jack Jones. I don't know if you remember Jack Jones.
Oh, I do remember Jack, of course.
He's my uncle. So he poses my uncle. And literally when I introduced him to some of the kids that saw me with him, he's my uncle. He's a cop. My family sent me to Pennsylvania, and they sent me with him because he's going to have his thumb on me and he's going to, make me behave. So, but that was the way I got into the little sting operation. So I was scared, and what do I know?
Yeah. You know what? It was, and I'm talking to somebody who certainly knows what I'm about to say. Growing up in New York City, and me, Brooklyn, you, the Bronx, I think you have some automatic by birth street smarts. I thought, well, this could be fun, and I can handle this. Not a big deal. And I remember the first day, Roberta, she was a county detective. She posed as my mother, and the only one that knew was the police chief. Friel, our police chief, and I had a detective in Bristol that was my contact, who I turned my drugs over to every day, and we'll talk a little bit about him in a little bit. Chucky Favoroso, who has since passed, what a great guy, and the school board president, the district attorney, and the principal, but nobody else knew in the school, so it kept pretty quiet to like 6 people, which is actually pretty good in government and law enforcement. I remember my first day, though. I'm sitting in the guidance counselor's office ready to get my assignments. And the guidance counselor had no idea. Same thing. My parents were divorced, and I moved to Pennsylvania out of New York with my mom here. And we lived in an apartment. And I'm sitting next to another kid he's a long time adult now, but because he was a juvenile at the time, and just for the sake of keeping it nice and clean, I'll just make his name Johnny. That's not his real name. So Johnny's sitting there, and he got kicked out of a private school, and he had to go to public school for stealing a triple beam balance scale from the chem lab. So I'm like, you got to be kidding me. Like, you know what that means, right? This guy's into drugs. If he's stealing a triple beam balance scale, he's not doing experiments in his house. He wants to do some extra credit assignments. So this kid was a local kid, and we took right away. He became my friend. And I remember being at his house. He was Italian and Spanish, and his mother was an amazing cook. I remember being there on Sundays, sometimes for dinner. And, afterwards people would say to me, well, how could you do that? I'm like, listen, this isn't personal. It's work, and he just introduced me to everybody. And we were off to the races right away. You know, the kids took a liking. He kind of, kind of like La Casa Nostra, he vouched for me, and this guy vouched for me that we were buddies and we hung out all the time. And that was day one in week one. And then we'll talk about some buys and some incidences had. But so tell me your day one, what happened?
For me, I mean, I wish day one was that smooth. I spent like a week where, especially coming from the Bronx, from what I remember, when I came to Ben Salem, I knew Knights Road, Street Road, and the Turnpike exit. That's all. And then they put me in this high school in Lower Bucks County. I have no idea. Oxford Valley Mall, what is that? Sesame Place? I have no idea. But that was my intro to Bucks County. So when I was at the school that first week, I had no idea. I knew no one. The kids would ask me, where are you from? I'm from New York. And for the grace of God, there was a girl in my the name of Dave Martinez. So she happened to know me because there were a couple kids in my class. So she sits with me at lunch and she's like, why don't you sit with us? I end up talking to this girl. She's from the Bronx. Wow. She goes, where are you from in the Bronx? I'm like, 181st. She goes, near the Bronx Zoo. I'm like, yeah, a block from the Bronx Zoo. She goes, so where'd you go to high school? I'm like, well, I was supposed to go to Roosevelt, but I used my dad's address. So she goes, well, I grew up at 182nd and Southern Boulevard, which is 2-3 blocks from where I grew up. And I'm like, thank God I was from the Bronx because she had me date that day. And then once her and I became friends, I met all the questionable characters and sat at their table, started playing basketball after school, got invited to parties. And from there, it just progressed and it went smooth. But that first week, I'm like, this is such a waste of time. I'm in. And you mentioned that all the people that you knew, the only one my guidance counselor did know. And a lot of that was because if the principal wasn't there, someone would be there to respond. And
makes sense.
I got, quite a few of in-school suspensions that my counselor had to meet me with. And obviously it was in school because what good would I be outside of school suspending? Right. So I got to meet a lot of the bad kids in school suspension. So, but yeah, so the only other person would be my guidance counselor that knew. And this girl, I mean, Puerto Rican girl. So we hit it off and she rolled me right in, which it immediately introduced me to the potential, drug dealers in the school that were known. So that was my passage.
Yes. So, it's similar. It took you a little bit longer because you didn't have that luxury of being transferring in with a kid who's still a triple beam balance scale. But yeah, this guy, Johnny, he just introduced me to everybody. We started making buys pretty quickly, in school, during school, in the bathroom, on the field, in the, at recess time or whatever they call it, break, I forget what they call it now. And then I would hang out like with the kids after school on the weekends. I mean, this was a 7-day-a-week job, hanging out with these kids. And some people are probably listening to this, like, how can you do that? And I remember like the star quarterback, lost his, and I felt bad. You feel bad because you are a human being. You form relationships with these kids, but you got to check yourself and realize that this is not personal. This is business. And he lost his scholarship because he was dealing drugs. And he lost his college scholarship. The teachers, no one knew. And, crazy. I made honor roll. My name was actually in the newspaper. I did better the second time around in high school than the first time. But I could remember, I do remember one day I was on a street making a buy, a kid I've been trying to buy from, and we started talking. We were behind a building. It was 2 kids, Johnny and me. The 2 kids, one was a dealer, one was just his buddy. And I'm making the buy, and the other kid, not the dealer, but the other kid was staring at me. And you know how you get a feeling like, Dave, something's not right.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, crap, something is not right. And that kid all of a sudden says to me, "You're a F cop." And I'm like, "What?" You're a cop. And I'm like, "What? You're a cop?" Going back and forth. And so I made a buy. They sold it to drugs that night to me anyway, but I never gave them another chance. I never made a second buy from them because I wasn't giving them another bite of the apple. And then doing some research later, I gave that kid a ticket for the 4 or 5 months I was on the street in Bensalem. I stopped that kid, and he heard I had a heavier New York accent,
Right.
and there's not a lot of people in this area with heavy New York accents, and he heard my accent, and then I guess he saw me, and he just recognized me, and I just put him on the defensive, and I never gave them a second bite of the apple, that I was a cop, and but that was like for a minute, you're like, oh crap, is this going to be over now? And it wasn't. We just continued on. But go ahead.
Yeah, I had a similar incident. I played basketball like crazy. So you mentioned a young man, and I'm not going to use his real name, but he had a nickname, Buster. And Buster, I mean, we were like this. I ate at his house. I met his parents. I mean, we were day in, day out, 7 days a week. So if he paged me and he's like, "Dave, hit me up. Buster was huge into stealing stereo equipment and breaking into cars. And I'm going to say in that 5-6 months that I was at the high school, he must have broken into maybe 50, 60 cars. And that's probably at the low end. And Buster would call me. He's like, "Dave, we're going out this weekend if you want to come out with us." And I'm like, "No, I'm good. The great thing was with Buster, he knew that my uncle was strict. So I always said, like, my uncle would drug test me. So I can't smoke weed with you guys. I can't. So he's like, "Nah, understood. So we ended up, he learned that I had a storage location where I had all my belongings that my uncle paid for. And so he would, on Monday, he's like, "Dave, can I hook up with you? I got to give you all that stuff that we got this weekend." I'm like, "Sure." Kicker boxes, head units from cars. I mean, everything from like wallets, pocketbooks that they found in cars. And he's like, "Yo, can you just stash them?" "Yeah, no problem." It was actually a cell at the Falls Township Police Department that we just kept putting things in. And the issue was when he calls me and he's like, "Dave, can we get that Kenwood radio out?" And I'm like, "Let me call. I got to check with my uncle. He has the key." And I would go meet with Jack Jones. "Jack, I need the radio." He goes, "Kid, we can't be giving out evidence. It's stolen stuff." I'm like, "Well, I'll find out who it's going to." So I would have to go with Buster, sell the person that's buying the radio from him, and make a note in my diary. And that's the biggest thing for me was I maintain a diary. So every day I knew who I met, who was in my classes. And they were pretty smart because tactfully they put me in specific classes because there was a kid that may have been a source. I know I had a Spanish class at Medill Bear, the middle school, Spanish class, and I loved my teacher. I felt so bad because I was 20. You said you were 22,
24.
24. I was 22, just turned 22. So I was much younger looking. But I spent those several months in that class, and Miss Rainier, God rest her soul, I felt horrible because we cheated. We took tests, and everybody's like, Dave. And everybody, their grade amazingly went up. But that's because I was in a Spanish class. But basically, Buster and I, like you said, we were so close. I mean, I literally had someone on the parkway there in Falls. There was a Taco Bell that's not there anymore. There's a McDonald's there, but I remember a group of kids from school that came up to Keith and they were going to jump him. I happened to be there, and I'm like, what do I do? Do I get involved? Do I defend them? And literally one kid takes a swing at him, and the other was going to attack him. So I come out of nowhere, tackle the one kid, hold him on the ground. Soon as I did that, I'm golden because Keeves, like, if this guy was a cop, he wouldn't have done that. So there's no even inclination that I'm a police officer. But I did have a kid in school, in class, that you're a snitch. And I walk out of the classroom and I go up to him like, what did you call me? Yeah. So I literally get into a scuffle with this kid. We're both in school suspension. Actually, I was in school. They suspended him out of school. But it was my only confrontation of anybody accusing me. But I knew no one here. So it was kind of easier. But that was definitely how do I get out of this situation?
It is crazy. It really makes you think quick on your feet, and it's the lies that you tell these kids trying to keep them straight in your mind. I'm posing as a 17-year-old. I was a junior, but I'm really a 24-year-old, with a college degree and a police officer. And I remember I had, a situation where somebody really got up in my face accusing me of being either a narc, a snitch, or a narc. And I just had to get back at them and just like basically put it on them, and, they kind of like, once you stand up to them and you don't cower down, they kind of leave you alone. But the kids are not stupid. I mean,
did you have an apartment or anything? Because I know I did.
Yeah, we had an apartment, but it was just a walk up. So I didn't go into it. And the kids, one time, I think I was being tailed. So I went upstairs, I sat up in there for a while until the coast was clear. But I had a really cool Camaro, and I had an expense account, which was a lot of fun. And I remember I was sitting in class, the detective, my contact who knew what was going on, because he's the one I turned my drugs over to every day. I don't know if I ever told you the story, but I'm sitting in this class. His daughter is next to me, and she did not know. He never told her, but she starts passing me notes. Hey, I'd like to go out one time. And so when I turned over my evidence one day, I gave him the note from his daughter. I'm like, yo, dude, you must be a weak father figure at home if she's hitting on this old guy. And he's like, you better knock that off. So, afterwards, when she's like, Dad, you never told me. He's like, I wasn't allowed to tell you. But she was a good kid, but she was a really nice kid.
That's one of the biggest things is the balancing of, and that tap dancing with those kids. Because I never met with Jones, Detective Jones at the police department. And that's because I had at least 2 or 3 of the kids of the officers that were in my classes. Yeah. So once one of them knows, forget it. It's over.
And blood's thicker than water.
Yep.
And blood's thicker than water.
Yep.
No, it was kept pretty quiet.
Yeah, thank God for that. But I tell you this, that if it wasn't for the fact that I had Keith and I had the girl from the Bronx, I mean, that's what everything, it went from that stagnant 1 week of like, this isn't going to work, to, hey, you want to go to prom? Do you want to go to this party? And there's a NFL player's brother, I don't want to mention, but his brother was in one of my classes. Wow. That went to Pennsbury. And I will tell you that parties, I mean, everything. And then one of the things, I don't know if they gave you ground rules, but ground rules was like not doing any of the drugs. They gave me some pills that you would burn that smell like marijuana. And so you would come in. I had a problem with my contacts constantly at that time. So my eyes would be all red, and I would come in and they'd be like, oh, Martinez is all smoked up already. So I would walk into class and my eyes are all bloodshot, and they're like, you good? You good? I'm like, I'm fine. And just playing that role. But it was that constant tap dancing of lies. So.
Yeah, I had rules, and when there was a situation where like you were dealing with these thefts of these radios, if there was a situation, because they had a couple of times these kids got involved in some stuff, and I had to basically get permission, to let the district attorneys know. And it was Alan Rubenstein at the time. Are you good with this? I can't not do this. I mean, obviously there's certain things you just can't do, right. But some of these minor thefts and stuff, as long as the right people got their stuff back and no one got hurt, I would get permission to do certain things. Right. but yeah, I kept a good log. I think I still actually have it. I'm not sure. I haven't seen it in years. It's probably in this mess of paperwork somewhere, but it's actually, funny of, the different rules that you have. I mean, I couldn't be disruptive in class, and you couldn't join any sports teams because once your real age would be found out, the team would be
That was
disqualified.
huge. We would, every day after school, we played at Twin Oaks, and it was Buster, myself, and a couple of Buster's friends and we were good. Like the high school team would come out to play against us. We would wipe the court with them. And they were always like, Dave, come out for the team. I told coach about you. I'm like, nah, I can't, because PIAA will probably suspend that, that whole program. So I couldn't do that. But it was a constant, balance with that. And I mean, even the prom, I mentioned the prom jokingly, but I remember being asked to the prom, and I'm like, how do I handle that? Well, like, it's too much potential for things to happen. Yeah. The same thing with parties. Like, they would pass a blunt, and you're like, a couple of times, like, you grab it, that puff, but don't inhale, and then pass it on. Like, and they think you smoked it, but it came up in court, and they were like, officer, isn't it true you smoked with my client? I'm like, I did. I don't know how to smoke, sir, but I did puff on the marijuana on the blunt. I don't know how, but I did. And that was so I wouldn't surrender my undercover capacity. But there was numerous scenarios like that where you're like, what do I do? I had a fight in the gym one day, and the kid, big jock, and he puts his finger on my chest, and he's like, listen to me, spick. And I'm like, and I'm biting my lip, and I let it go. I asked Jack Jones, and he goes, well, we're going to have to meet with Mr. Rubenstein and find out what happens if they assault you or hit you. So I'm like, if he hits me first, what do I do? Well, you got to defend yourself. And Mr. Rubenstein was on point. He's like, David, you're not there. I don't have you there to get hurt. So you do what you got to do. And I remember in the locker room, the kid corners me, pushes me against the locker, and I just like, look, I don't want any problems. And I walk away. I turn around, pow, punch him. We both get suspended, and it is what it is. It was left at that. But I mean, what do I do?
Alan Rubenstein was great when he was very supportive. And he got a lot of press afterwards when the arrests all came down. I remember just the different buys, and one time there was word on the street that there was an undercover in the school, and the kids were going to give them a blanket party. I don't even know if that's still a thing anymore. So I remember I had some backup at the time. I guess maybe county detectives. So it must have been a few other cops that knew, because I remember working with some backup, and then they wouldn't let me do buys unless it was out in the open. After a couple of days, I said, this ain't working. So we're going to have to let it go, and we'll play it by ear and see. And I pulled the backup off of me and the cover officers, and I went back to just doing business, because it was very hard to work under that. But I know at the end of the day, I made, I think, about 65 buys. I think we arrested 21 or 24 people for either adults selling to kids or kids selling to kids. But there would it wasn't anybody with possession. I know there was, and it's so funny because I think this is what got me off doing education, because I remember the school board at the time wanted, from my reports, the list of the teachers that allowed kids to do drugs in school. And I said, well, first of all, there's no such thing. Teachers did not allow kids to do drugs in school. Teachers were unaware of what the kids were doing. Teachers didn't understand the lingo, and teachers didn't understand the kids' ways of hiding it. I said, why don't, instead of doing that, going after teachers for no reason, why don't we educate? And we put together a program and started educating teachers, and I started doing that. But what was the amount of arrests? Do you remember?
For us, I mean, we had probably 50, 60 kids that we actually charged.
Wow.
I'm going to say adult-wise, we probably had some kids that were 18 up to, I had a couple older people that I ended up making connections with. But specifically, like you were mentioning about the surveillance, like they would not want me anywhere if no one had eyes on me. So I remember playing ball, and a couple of the detectives from from Falls that worked on the Jack Jones. They were like, I need you to watch. We're watching. He wouldn't say what they were watching. He didn't tell them, but they were supposed to keep eyes on me as a target. So they had no clue. But I mean, I spent hours and hours playing basketball, and would in there make a couple buys here and there. But our 50, 60 kids, there were a few kids that were highly involved in the game. We had a couple Morrisville residents who were actually Trenton kids that actually used Morrisville addresses in Bucks County to be able to go to Pennsbury. But with a guy that I bought a pound and a half at the Burger King right across the street from Pennsbury High School. But that came from a young kid in one of my classes that set it up and says, listen, I got a kid. He's from New York. He's about buying drugs. So I ended up hooking up with that guy. I will tell you a funny story in the Bronx, in Brooklyn. Have you ever heard of anyone buying acid?
I can't remember, but I bought acid when I was here.
Right. I came here and I meet some kid that has LSD micro dots.
That's what, That's
and
what
I'm like, what? So they're like LSD, and they had the microdots, and then they had the perforated paper with like Bart Simpson or a cartoon on it with the drops of LSD. And I remember my first buy. I meet this kid and I'm buying a certain number. I was buying a sheet. And then he's like, listen, I'm not going to be able to give you the whole sheet, but I'll give you portions of it. So he tears it apart and he hands them to me like all separate. And I have them in my hand, put them in my pocket, give him the money. So I go to turn them over to Jack and he goes, what are you, stupid kid? And I'm like, what do you mean? And he goes, you have those in your hand? And he goes, that's going to go right through your skin. I'm like, what do I know? I'm 22 years old. I've never bought acid in my life, but that was a very humbling moment. So
I had bought the acid, but I kept little pieces of aluminum foil in my pocket. So I would immediately just throw it into my pocket and go into the bathroom and wrap it in tinfoil to preserve the drugs so that there was actually drugs on the paper and I turn them in. But we bought marijuana. I bought cocaine, crack, LSD, and believe it or not, Quaaludes back then, and powder cocaine as well. A little phencyclidine, but no heroin, no meth. So this is September to December of '88. So Christmas break comes for me, and we decide that's it. We're not going to get any more time to call it a day. At the same time, gentlemen, as well. I think you were there. Juan Diaz was a Ben Salem detective doing an adult sting at the same time. So, and Juan had been undercover at Ben Salem High School years before. And then Juan left for DEA, and Juan and I were doing undercover at the same time, but two different targets. So I'm gone, and the kids just don't know whatever happened to me. And the DA's office is getting all my paperwork, criminal complaints, juvenile allegations, petitions back then. And Juan's arrests come down. So everybody thinks, okay, we don't know what happened to this Harran kid. He just, whatever. That was actually, I used the same name, spelled it differently. Don't ask me why they did that. And they thought they were in the clear until the end of January of '89, when one morning at 5 a.m., kids started being woken up by police, and all the arrests went down. And it was hard sitting in court next to some of these kids, like I was their friend. And even like, the defense attorneys would question me. Well, didn't you do this? And didn't you hang out with them? And how didn't you, it wasn't entrapment, and it was, in some ways I felt bad a little bit, but some of them, I as you could probably relate to the statement, not all of them were bad kids. They just had bad time.
Well, I'll give you this. Like I mentioned Buster. Buster was definitely, his thing was car theft. And I remember, because most of our hearings were in front of Judge Wisloski, her mom.
Right.
Judge Wisloski's daughter now is the district magistrate there. But I remember Buster, I was going to buy a couple ounces of weed right after school outside the Burger King. And I couldn't meet, but Buster knew that I was supposed to meet our mutual friend that was going to sell me the weed.
Right.
And I get a call from Buster, and he's like, Dave, I got your stuff. I'm like, what do you mean you have my stuff? He goes, yo, I know you can meet with such and such. I got it. I'm like, Buster, no, why? He goes, bro, don't worry about it. He fronted it to me. You could pay me later, or we'll pay him later. I'm like, Buster, no, I don't need you to do that. But there you have, I mean, that trust, and
Yeah.
it's a matter of like they wanted to charge him with the dealing of a controlled substance within 500 feet of the school. And I'm like, but no, like he's not a drug dealer, and he did it for me.
Yeah.
But I mean, there were, I know that Buster ended up cooperating with Laura Makefield, Yardley, Falls, Ben Salem, Bristol, because he was all over Bucks County breaking into cars. And I remember bringing the car with him, and I'm like, Buster, just tell him, be honest. When the whole gig was over, he told him, I broke into that car 2 times, I broke into that car 3 times, and he just cooperated the whole way. And I felt horrible, but he was a thief.
Yeah. And it wasn't, listen, as we wrap up, it wasn't personal for us.
Right.
I think it's funny, two kids from New York wind up, obviously because we didn't know anybody here. And hey, New York is New York. Sorry, Philadelphia and Bucks County, but New York is New York. And I've spent 39 years now in Bucks County here, but we got to experience an opportunity that most police officers don't get to experience, being called that day to the director's office, the chief's office, and then coming up to meet the district attorney. And then, I had a good relationship with Alan Rubenstein after that for the many years that he was on the DA, and then of course on the bench. Just a super guy, but just a great experience. And I always tell people, 21 Jump Street, me and Johnny Depp have a lot in common. A lot. Yeah. Thanks. Everybody else laughs at that statement too, but thank you. But
it's the truth. Like if to live it, and you don't appreciate it back then. You think about it now, and everybody says, "Oh, that must have been awesome." At the time, I didn't appreciate it as much as I do now. Even talking to you, I'm like, you know what? We lived a once in a lifetime experience. So it was amazing.
And we're still riding the ride, Dave. We're still riding the
ride.
Still the greatest job on earth, I believe. And
no
I'm
doubt.
enjoying it. I know you're doing a great job in Chester County, and you got a great crew there. Say hello to your boss and your district attorney, another great guy. So you got a great team over there in Chester. Dave, I appreciate you coming on. When
Thanks for having me.
Podcast, I wasn't going to do, I was trying to bring on guests. I don't want to just do me talking, but I thought this was a great story and I wanted to get it out. And then I'm thinking, who can I bring on with me? And I'm like, well, the only guy I know is Juan. I have no idea where he is. And you're the only undercover school guy I know in the county. There's been a couple after us, but I don't really know where they are.
I don't think they were successful.
No. Well, you see that? Got to be a native New Yorker. What am I going to tell you, right?
Absolutely.
The best city in the world, my friend. And New Yorkers know how to get it done. I'm going to take a lot of beating for saying all this about New York because I'm not in New York anymore. Sorry, but hopefully your Yankees, they're doing okay.
Listen, we're in first. You guys are in first, so Subway Series.
A Subway Series would be nice. But I don't know. Can you still sit on the subway on the platform and watch the games? No, let's get together. Let's take a ride to Brooklyn, get a Nathan's hot dog.
That's a deal.
All right, buddy.
All right.
Well, that's Dave Nieves, formerly Ben Salem Township detective, undercover in a high school, as I was in 1988, and now a Chester County detective. And who knows what has in store for Dave next. Maybe this will be it for you and you'll get to retire and enjoy life. But welcome and thank you for listening to Law and Order BUX. Until next time, everyone. God bless. Thank you for joining us as we explore another aspect of law enforcement in Bucks County. To stay up to date on future episodes and gain further insight into the work we do, be sure to like, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you get your podcasts. For more information about the Bucks County Sheriff's Office and the services we provide, please visit our website and be sure to download the official Bucks County Sheriff's Office app, available on Google Play and in the App Store. Join us next time for another in-depth look at law and order right here in Bucks County.